What's up, gamers? It's time for the full review of the Model O Wireless. If you've been following the release of this mouse, you'll have seen that there's been quite a few issues so far with this release. There's been customers who haven't been receiving their mouse in a timely manner, as well as numerous quality control issues that have been reported. Now, we're going to dive into all of it, but first, I have a quick message from today's sponsor, This Shit Works Hemorrhoid Cream. Do you frequently suffer from painful hemorrhoids? Well, if your back door hurts, you no longer have to worry because this shit works. Now, they're good people over there at the cream factory. So I mentioned that there's been quite a few quality control issues reported. I've been seeing quite a few reports on Twitter, on Reddit, people coming up to me on the street saying, "Hey, Beezy, have you heard about the QC issues with the Model O Wireless?" I sure have. So let's look at those complaints a little bit. So we've seen complaints in regards to primarily the side buttons. A lot of the complaints are stating that there's a lot of pre-travel before the buttons actuate, and in some instances the buttons not actuating at all. There's also been complaints of the triggers where the tension is different to the point that sometimes it almost feels like they have completely different switches. Now, I've also seen some reports of sensor issues as well as connectivity issues. Those aren't quite as widespread, though, as the side button complaints and the trigger complaints. Now, before we completely chalk up the Model O Wireless to being a complete piece of garbage based on everything we're hearing out there, it is worth noting that typically disgruntled customers are always the vocal minority. We have no definitive data on how many units have shipped. We have no data on, of those, how many are working great, and how many of them do indeed have issues. What I can tell you, though, is that this one right here, the one sent out to me, is dang near flawless. This mouse has been just great to use here for the past week. I got 23 hours on it and really can't find much wrong with this mouse. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but Beezy, you're a famous YouTuber. They probably cherry-picked your unit before sending it to you, and you might be on to something. But with the QC warning out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look further at this mouse. So the Model O Wireless is offered in two colors. It's offered in white and it's also offered in black. At this time, it's only offered in a matte finish, which is a little bit unfortunate because I found this finish to be pretty slippery. So because it was so slippery, right away I went ahead and bought some grips for this mouse. And you notice these grips are definitely not a perfect fit, and that's because these are actually from a larger sheet called Zonin cell phone grips. The Glorious grips are currently sold out, and other grips were 2 to 3 weeks out on shipping, so I went ahead and bought this pack. It comes with 4 pieces. They're 5 by 7.8 inches, and it's a little bit of a pain in the ass because you got to do some arts and crafts. You got to cut it out, cut it to size, and then really just kind of take your time and just get the fit down. I found that I had to leave some extra space in between the buttons. Otherwise, it was too flush with the buttons, and it was just a little bit of a pain. These are definitely a big improvement over the slipperiness that I was experiencing prior to putting them on. So right away, let's jump into the sensor because I ran into some issues with my sensor. The good thing, though, is I figured out what it was right away. The liftoff out of the box is set to 1 millimeter. You can go into the software, though, and you can adjust it to 2 millimeters. That's what my previous main was, the Endgame XM1, the G Pro Wireless, and several other mice that I have. And a lot of times I don't really pay close attention, if I'm being honest. But this time I did because it was a problem. Once I changed it, though, I had no further issues with the sensor. So luckily for me, that kind of solved the issue. So if you are having any issues with your sensor, I would recommend right away going into the software and changing that liftoff distance. So another thing to note, in the software, you can change your DPI buttons. I disable all of mine except for the one that I primarily use. I don't ever change it. I leave it on 800 DPI all the time. So this is one of the first things that I do. So the triggers. Now this is why I said at the beginning that my mouse was almost flawless, because I have kind of the same issue that a lot of other people have reported, and that is that my trigger tension is different. Now for me, it's very minor, but my right trigger here is a little bit more stiff than my left trigger, and I didn't actually notice this right away, so I started paying a little bit closer attention. Now it almost feels like one is a 20 ohm run switch and one is a 50. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. It's really strange. And, maybe Omron updated their switches and Glorious just has, a mixed batch of older and newer. It's hard to say. For me, I definitely don't notice it while I'm gaming. But when I'm just testing it like this, then I can tell a little bit. But not the end of the world, because like I said, when I'm gaming, I can't tell. Even when I'm aim training, I really can't tell. And if it's something I have to look for, then it doesn't bother me. I still find that these switches have less pre and post travel than the regular Model O, and that all in all, they're still really solid switches. Or triggers, I should say. And I just have no issues at all with these triggers. Now, the side buttons on my mouse are fantastic. I think they're better than the Model O side buttons. And like I said in my unboxing, I didn't mind the Model O side buttons at all. So the fact that mine on this mouse feel better is fantastic. Definitely no complaints at all there. The scroll wheel is literally the same as the Model O. Mine actuates a little easier, which is no big deal. It definitely feels smoother than the Model O. It's definitely a little more snug, and no complaints with the scroll wheel. But that's great, BZ. So your mouse is great. But how did it perform? Well, it performed really well. In grid shot, I hit 100,000, and then I hit it again, and then I hit it again. And then when I was streaming to thousands of viewers, I hit it again live. The only problem is, dude, my aim is faster than my brain. Fuck yeah, that is a new personal record. Let's go. Hell yeah. So another thing I thought was pretty funny is as soon as I put these grips on, I wanted to go ahead and test the mouse. So I just jumped into a round of Cold War, and literally the very first match, I started off 19-0. So that was awesome. So overall, with this mouse being $80, I personally feel it represents a great value. But with the QC issues that are out there, I would just be slightly cautious. Like I said, the disgruntled customers are always going to be the vocal minority. So we don't really know how many out there in the wild aren't working well, and we don't know how many that are. So it's definitely a gamble. Just be cautious. It might not be a bad idea to wait until several batches down the road when Glorious has tightened up their quality control a little bit. But it's totally up to you. You're the buyer, not me. I have mine, and mine's working great. So that's all I have for you guys in this one, and I'll talk to you sometime soon.